Good evening, everyone. Glad you're here, and welcome to those on York TV as well. Just the usual reminder here, cell phones are silenced. There are 3 exits here, so when it comes time to exit, no need to jam up at the one. We've got 2 and 3 over here. And if you're having trouble hearing other than the microphone, be aware that some seats open in the front row here, and we do have listening devices back there. First off, happy 250th anniversary to our country, huh? Yeah. Our speaker is a noted historian and longtime friend of our cooperative. Sandy Swiegel's been more recently bringing her into, there's Sandy in the back, bringing in Frank for a series of seminars over the last 4 years or so. But I just learned tonight that the original convener here was none other than Jerry Thompson. And so it's a team effort. It's a team effort here, right? So our speaker is a retired educator who taught primarily things like government, politics, constitutional law, American history, things like that, while also serving as the director of college counseling, so help with that. He's received many awards over the years and has received and has on many advisory boards. Yeah. Both locally and nationally, so very impressive. Please welcome Frank Sachs.
Thanks, Harvey. Can you hear me? Yes. Excellent. So today is June 30th, correct? Correct. That means in 4 days, we have the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. That's actually the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But on 2 days from now, on July 2nd, that's the day they voted to accept independence. And John Adams always thought we celebrated the wrong day because it was July 2nd was the day we voted on independence. Then, anybody know what they did on July 3rd? Don't say they had a picnic. They debated everything in the Declaration of Independence. I'm sure Jefferson took that very well, being the thick-skinned individual that he was. Anybody have any idea how many changes they made on July 3rd? 0 is incorrect, Linda, but good guess. 86.
Oh my gosh. And they didn't have a computer?
No, they didn't have a computer. 86 changes. And for the first half of his life, Jefferson tended to say it was a group project. But the second half of his life, I did it myself. So we'll get started here today. We're going to talk about voting rights because this is a big year. We've got an election coming up. We've got an important election. So when Harvey and I and Sandy talked, we said, what should we talk about this summer to kind of inspire people about this year? And we settled on voting rights. So we're going to cover 4 things today. How our voting rights have evolved over time. They didn't start out the way they are now. Who gets to vote and why that matters. over half the people in this room would not have been able to vote in the first election. And I'm not talking to any of you guys right now. There have been changes in the way that we vote over time. We'll talk about what some of those are and how they came about. And where our voting rights stand today and maybe tomorrow. So let's get started. Anybody know who either of these guys are? Wild guess. You said who? George Washington, right here. And this guy right here? George Washington. They're both George Washington. In the early days, people would gather together for an electioneering ritual. The person who hoped to gain your vote would throw a party, a barbecue. You would go there and you would drink, and you would fiddle, and you would dance, and sometimes you'd wrestle, you'd eat barbecue, you'd shout, you'd yell, you'd party hardy. Election day was an excuse to party. Where did that go? So let's begin with George Washington. He's running for something called the House of Burgesses. Anybody been to the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg? Yeah, our first representative government. 1757, we're what, 30 years away? He's running to be a representative during the colonial period. In order to celebrate this, he's invited you to a party where he has 46 gallons of beer, and if you don't like beer, I got one hogshead, I have no idea what that is, one barrel, and 12 bowls of rum punch, come on, 35 gallons of wine, let's hope it was Madeira, 2 gallons of cider, and 3.5 pints of brandy. Wow. How many people? Well, just enough to get him elected. He served this to his neighbors at the time of the election, hoping they would reciprocate by casting ballots for him. So if somebody threw you a big party, fed you to your stuff, gave you plenty to drink, might you say thank you with your vote? This was how it was done.
Isn't that only men?
Now you're causing problems. Yes, you're absolutely correct. It's only men. So how we vote, and then it was time to vote. You're all sufficiently serensified. Each candidate stood on the platform. One stood here, one stood here. They called you up, you walked up, the magistrate stood in the middle, and he would say, "How do you vote?" And in front of the entire assembly, you would say, "I vote for," hopefully, "Washington." And Washington would say, "I thank you for your vote." And you would return and join the crowd. Your vote is appreciated. This was called public voice voting, and this is how it was initially done. Think about it. How would you feel in November? And there might be people who would like to know this. If you were supposed to tell everybody how you voted and how you were expected to vote. Was this intimidation? Yes, I think it was. Subtle, but it's still intimidation. You got a rum toddy, barbecue, corn pudding, your lovely time on the farm. It's subtle bribery. Sometimes it wasn't so subtle. So this is a famous picture of what Election Day looked like. Election Day was a holiday. Where did that go? Why don't we have Election Day as a holiday? All right. Anybody find somebody in this picture that looks like they're having too good a time? Maybe, oh, first off, what's missing in this picture?
Women.
Okay, the women, yes. Thank you. I don't see them anywhere. How many people look like they're having too good a time? Well, let's start with this guy. He looks like he's having a good time. And then there's this guy. He's already had a good time. Hope he's voted. And then there's this guy. He looks like he's just getting ready to pass out. This was election day in the early Republic of America. Let's fast forward, 2020. How voting is conducted became an explosive issue for absolutely no good reasons. Today, some people get to vote early. Anybody here ever voted early? You can start voting in the primary right now. Some people voted by mail. Anybody here vote by mail? Look at this. Some people had to stand in line for 4 hours. I can see that none of you are from Atlanta, Georgia. Some places you have to show ID. We have measures here to prevent that in Minnesota. Some places you have to register months in advance or you can't vote. Other places you can register the same day. What's Minnesota got? Same day. We'll come back to that. Some places you have to do it in person or not at all. Some places you can drop it off in a drop box. In Texas, sometimes you have to drive 2.5 to 3 hours to reach the drop box in your county because they only have one. Making voting very easy. Some places you have to drive 200 miles to find a drop box. It's like 3 hours, both ways. Some places you can vote absentee for any reason at all, and other places you have to have a reason. So, has it always been this way? Yes. Voting's always been something we debate, and we tend to try to make it easier, but we don't always do it. There's been some chaos, and since the early days, the Viva Voice, living voice voting, things have begun to evolve. Now, as our country expanded, pressure to increase over who had the right to vote. Initially, it was only men. But let's clarify which men actually got to vote. White men of property, yes, landowners, who could all read and write. Okay, so how do we go from drunken parties to private booths peacefully waiting in line? From the beginning, voting was a key element in our democracy. Now, I'm going to say it's a key element because this didn't exist anywhere else when we started it. You're going to have to forgive us for not getting it perfect right away because we had no models. There hadn't been any kind of voting for leaders since the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic, and that's 2,500 years before this. So there's no experience with this, but they're working on it, and we've been working on getting it right. I think that's rather amazing. So we started with voice voting, and then we moved to something called town square voting. I have a candidate over here. I have a candidate over here. All of you who support Harvey, go to this side. All of you who support Jerry, go to this side. You'd have to get up and walk over and stand behind the person that you're going to vote for. And then they did something called counting heads. Head counting. That's where the term came from town square voting. And then somebody got this great idea. Let's take a little ball or a musket ball or an ear of corn, and we'll put it in a box. And if I like you, I'll put a yellow ear over here, and if I want the other person, I put a red ear here, and they put it in the box, and they called that the ballot box, the bullet box, the ballot box. That's how we get the term ballot box. Ballata, we like those little ball, the ballot box. We like those Latin phrases. So what's the Constitution say about voting? Very little. Why is that? The voting is a state's right. Each state was to determine how they would conduct their elections. We don't have an election day. We have a day where we have 50 elections in this country. We put it all on the same day, but it didn't start out that way either. The 15th Amendment, 1870, so it's after the Civil War, says the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, and previous conditions of servitude, which we would say is slavery. I know what you're thinking. What about women? Well, we'll get to that in a moment here. The 19th Amendment, 1920. The rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So how many times does the word woman appear in the Constitution? None.
0.
This is the only time they basically kind of refer to women. But interestingly enough, the 14th Amendment, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, had already given women the right to vote. They just didn't assert it. So let's talk about those other amendments. The 9th Amendment says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. They're talking about voting. That's included there. If it's not in the Constitution, that doesn't mean you don't have the right. You do. The 10th Amendment, very important. Powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Now they're talking about things like elections. Elections are not mentioned in the Constitution. This is as close as you get, and it's one of the parts of the Bill of Rights. The 14th Amendment, which we're going to come back to at the end here because there's been some news about the 14th Amendment today, said full citizenship rights, including voting rights, to all people born or naturalized in the United States. So being born here gets you what? Voting rights. It gets you citizenship. You can be naturalized, which means you have to be here a certain number of years, you have to take a test, and then you have to renounce your previous country, and then you can get citizenship, or you can be born here. So, who gets to vote and why does it matter? At the beginning, the vast majority had no voting rights. This included most men and women, all poor people, all enslaved people, and people who were newly arrived. Don't even get me started on Native Americans. All right, bonus question. Native Americans not living on reservations got the right to vote in what decade? What century? The 19th century, or the 20th century, 1922 or 24. But that's Native Americans living in town. If you were a Native American living on a reservation, you know when you got the right to vote? 1974. Within the lifetime of everybody in this room. But we're moving in the right direction. So who could vote? Well, white men who owned property, who could read or write. That was a robust 1.5 to 1.8% of the population. It was 40,000 people voted in the first election in 1788. Not a lot. We've gotten much better. The first to change their voting laws was New England. They endorsed something called universal white male suffrage. And they chose to use something brand new. Rather than giving people a piece of corn or a colored musket ball, we're going to give you a piece of paper, and you can write the person's name down, and you can put that in the ballot box. So that's when paper ballots began to show up, and other states began to follow. In 1790, the first Congress passed the first Naturalization Act, establishing who could be citizens and who could vote. It provided U.S. citizenship only to white immigrants from Western and Northern Europe. In effect, you could come, you had to live here 7 years, and you became a citizen after 7 years, and any of your children who were under the age of 21 got to become citizens with you. Most immigrants at this point in time came from Great Britain, Ireland, Scotland, Norway, and Germany. That doesn't mean we didn't have immigrants from other states. Yes, there were French. Yes, there were some Spanish and Portuguese. But these were primarily where people came from. In practice, only white male property owners, women and non-whites, and indentured servants could not vote. The 1790 census, the first census, revealed that there were 800,000 free white males leading households in 15 states. The 14th and 15th states were Vermont and Kentucky. Major changes to election balloting begin to occur in the 18th century. The Constitution did not anticipate a two-party system. It began to emerge. By 1820, most states had universal white male suffrage. And then New Jersey did something amazing, and then they took it away. When the country began in the first election in 1789, if you were from New Jersey, were you from New Jersey? Oh, okay. Anybody from New Jersey from 1789? If you were a woman, you got to vote. Now, got to remember, New Jersey was largely Dutch. And the Dutch had a very different view of women. They saw them as equals. They allowed them to own their own property. They allowed them to divorce. They allowed them to sue for parental rights. They allowed a lot of things. And they allowed women to vote. But by 1807, some politicians, I think they were men, said we have to relieve women of this burden of thinking about politics. They need to be more focused on the home and taking care of the children. We'll take this away from you. You don't have to worry about voting anymore. And they took the right to vote away. How many people knew that? We doesn't get talked about very much. I want all of you talking about it. The printing press changes the dynamics because newspapers go from 6 cents to a penny. And if I'm a political party, I'm going to put the name of my candidates where? In the newspaper. And political parties got the idea, and they started printing out their party's members. And when people started looking at what they put in the paper, they reminded them of something new that they had to get when they traveled. A railroad ticket. And so consequently, they started putting tickets in the paper that looked like this. And they were called the party ticket, because it was a railroad ticket. In fact, we started using different colors to identify with the different parties. So party tickets, looking like railroad tickets, they're actually sometimes giant sheets of paper off of flaming red or bright blue, and they were how you showed your party loyalty. So you brought your ticket with you into the booth, because even if you couldn't read or write, you could copy down the names and put them on the ballot and put them in the ballot box. This led to both voter suppression, ballot buying, intimidation, ballot stuffing. It was hard work to keep elections free and fair. You could try to hide your ticket, but ruffians would show up at the polling place and they'd open up your jacket and say, "That's not the ticket you're voting. This is the ticket you're voting." And there's a very sad story. It took place in 1859. A young man by the name of George Kyle. He went to the polling place with his brother, and he had the wrong ticket. So they began to rough him and his brother up. And they made a mistake. They fought back. And so the ruffians ended up beating up George and killing his brother. They shot him. George was a little upset. He sued the ruffians in the state of New York. He wanted to be compensated for his pain and loss. And of course, the court said, any man of ordinary courage could have made his way to the polls. We don't know what the heck you're talking about. And that was the end of that story. So let's talk about the election of 1864. Quite possibly before this year, the most important election we're going to have in the history of the country. Anybody know who these two people are? All right, everybody's got Lincoln. We got the low-hanging fruit. Okay, good. Anybody know who this is? George McClellan. Absolutely. They're running against each other for the presidency in 1864. The last time America has reelected a president, it was in 1832, and it was Andrew Jackson. So it's 32 years before. Everyone's been elected 4 years and out. We're in the middle of a civil war. Lincoln thinks it's important he get reelected, and George McClellan's basically saying, let's just make peace with the South, let them keep their slaves, let them come back in the Union, let's go back to everything the way it was before. Lincoln makes some courageous moves here. The first thing he does is he issues the Emancipation Proclamation after Antietam. Huge victory. All persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state in rebellion against the United States shall be free forever. Lincoln refuses to make peace if slavery is allowed to continue. He's willing to lose the election over this. And the South wants to make peace, come back in, just forgive everything. And McClellan is in favor of this. And the war is not going well. And Lincoln has to figure out a way that he might be able to win this election free and fair. And he comes up with an idea. Actually, I think Seward or Stanton came up with the idea. And McClellan saying emancipation be damned, and Lincoln saying no. Now, Lincoln was aware of the following. Most Union soldiers, many of whom were immigrants from Germany or Ireland, did not support slavery. One of the big reasons they didn't support slavery was economic, because if there's slavery, what job am I going to have when I get out of the army? Because you have a slave who does it for nothing, or you hire me. So they're opposed to slavery. However, you can't vote unless you go home to your town. So you're from Akron, Ohio, and you're at Gettysburg. Excuse me, I'm going to take 3 weeks off, go home and vote and come right back, okay? Not going to happen. How can we get these people to vote? Because chances are they're going to vote with us. Soldiers had no way to vote. And Lincoln and Stanton and Seward come up with an idea. Let's encourage the states to create something called absentee balloting. So this is the first election where we have absentee balloting. The Irish and the German immigrants vote overwhelmingly for Lincoln. Black soldiers didn't have the right to vote, but they were in favor of Lincoln. And lo and behold, when they cast the votes, 75% of the soldiers' votes went for Abraham Lincoln, and he gets reelected president. And then, of course, we all know what happens a month later. Unfortunately, he went to the theater.
Yeah.
Some unpleasantness happened. Okay, the election of 1864 was our most significant election for democracy to that point in time. And now soldiers have the right to vote. Do they have the right to vote today? Absolutely. Can we get their votes by mail within 5 days? Probably not, but we're still going to count them. The 15th Amendment passes and gives black men the right to vote, and Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were fit to be tied. They felt the 15th Amendment should include women as well, and it drove a wedge between them and Frederick Douglass. But we now begin to see the beginning of the rise of political bosses, particularly in New York with Boss Tweed. And you start to get a lot of illegal votes and ballot stuffing because there were no ways to control this at that point in time. But Australia rides to the rescue. Did you know that Australia rode to the rescue for American elections because they created something? A secret ballot. Up until that point, you had your little card, you voted in the open, people could see what you're doing. Now, we're going to put you in a booth. We're going to let you vote in secret. We weren't the ones that came up with that. In fact, they started it in 1856. England adopted it before us, 1872. And eventually, though, during industrialization, we also begin the secret ballot. And the secret ballot helps in a number of ways because it's harder to buy people's votes if you can't see how they're voting. It really cuts down on intimidation and voter fraud. And America took things to a different level. And secret balloting becomes the cornerstone of our elections, just in time for the South to reemerge and begin to deny votes to their black population with something called a certain kind of laws. What is it? Jim Crow laws. They had poll taxes. If you want to vote, you got to pay a poll. And they start realizing that poor whites and blacks were starting to vote together in the South to put the people in charge that were going to be more fair to people. So they disqualified blacks from being able to vote. Now, in 1868, 80% of the blacks in the South voted. 80% is a great margin for any group to vote. By 1900, they had reduced that to 3% in the South. So we're talking about a period of 32 years and 77% of the people who had initially voted can no longer vote in the South. So yes, they're free, but how free were they? And then they created things like grandfather clauses. You turn to a black man and say, well, you can vote if your grandfather voted. My grandfather was a slave. I'm sorry, you can't vote. Grandfather clause. Literacy tests. Have you seen any of those literacy tests? Impossible. Poll taxes, vigilante organizations, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, literacy tests. Voters take literacy tests here. Poll taxes now, grandfather clauses. My favorite was, tell me how many jelly beans are in that jar. Any fool could tell me exactly how many jelly beans are in that jar. Even if they guessed correctly, they'd tell them it was wrong. Voter suppression was definitely something in the South. But technological advantages begin to help this situation. Any of you remember the ballot box when it looked like that? I think my first ballot in like 1972, I voted on a machine like that. Anybody else have a machine like that? That was all the rage. That booth was popular from 1919 to 1980. So most of us got an experience with that. But today we have optical scanners in Minnesota. We have iPads. We have internet balloting. They still have those punch cards with hanging chads. Fortunately, we're not in Florida. You need a scorecard sometime to keep tabs on the different ways that different states create their ballots. Not everybody does it as efficiently as we do in Minnesota. There's early voting, absentee balloting. Some states it's easier, some states it's harder. registrations options do vary. In 1965, we had landmark legislation that has largely been undone. The Voter Rights Act. It banned literacy tests. It provided for federal oversight of voter regulations in areas with less than 50% non-white populations. That doesn't exist anymore. It authorized the Attorney General to investigate the use of poll taxes. Well, I haven't heard about any poll taxes, so I guess there's been no investigations. States with a history of racial discrimination needed to get federal government clearance if they were going to change their voter laws. This was called pre-clearance. This existed up until Shelby versus whatever county. States like Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas, and Virginia, if they wanted to change their voter laws, had to get pre-clearance because they were known to deny vote to certain populations. Why are Alaska and Arizona on this list? Who were they denying votes to? Native Americans. Yes.
Where are they going to get pre-clearance from?
The Justice Department. Well, yeah, the Justice Department. Okay. And it worked for 50 years, and then the Supreme Court says there is no more racial discrimination in this country, so we don't need this anymore, so we're going to do away with pre-clearance. And if somebody isn't treating you right, you can sue them afterwards and we'll change the law. And guess what started happening right away? They began to change voter laws in almost all those states. In Mississippi alone, the turnout increased from 1964, 6% voted. In 1969, 59% voted. Voting increased for unrepresented populations. Congress extended this provision 4 times, almost always unanimously, until 2007. And then we got this case, Shelby County versus Holder, a 5-4 decision which basically destroyed pre-clearance as a requirement. And since that point in time, elections have become decidedly less controlled or unfair. And that goes with gerrymandering places and everything else. I have a separate presentation on representation and how that's evolved over time. But for 48 years, pre-clearance was there, and elections were considered primarily very fair, even in the South. So, what is our expectations for voting and elections today? Well, I think it's fair to say we want free, fair, safe, and secure elections. And by and large, we've lived in a state that provides that. I think they have, in the last 10 years, three cases of voter fraud. 3 times somebody tried to vote twice, and it usually was a mistake. They forgot they put in an early ballot, and they went on voting day. I mean, it has happened. But 3, how many people have voted in Minnesota in that period of time? Maybe 3 million? So how are we doing? Every eligible voter should have their voice heard. We have to be patient. It takes longer to count ballots, particularly with absentee ballots, or not every state starts counting ballots the day of the election. We do in Minnesota. In Pennsylvania, you can't start counting absentee ballots until the polls close. It takes a lot longer there. And in California, everybody's mailing their ballots in, and you have 2 weeks to get it in from the mail. So it takes longer some places, but it's worth it. Our democracy is resilient. Our democracy is strong enough to take this. Now, how voter registration occurs in redistricting. 15 states today require that you register 28 to 30 days before the election. That means if you get there within those 28 days, you're not going to vote. Who are those states? Familiar names here: Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, Ohio, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. 10 states you have to register 20 to 27 days before: Delaware, Kansas, Missouri, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, Virginia, and West Virginia. 6 states you can register up until the day before, up to 15 days: Alabama, Massachusetts, Montana, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, South Dakota. 18 states you can register on Election Day. If you've been missing Minnesota, you will see it now because I made it a different color. But we're joined by California, Colorado, Connecticut, District of Columbia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Nevada, Utah, Vermont, Washington, Wisconsin, Wyoming. Okay, in the last 13 elections, 3 states have led the nation in voting. One of those states has led the nation 10 times. The other 3 were by 2 other states. Anybody know who's led the nation 10 times? Minnesota, yeah, sure. Maine and Colorado. Guess what Maine and Colorado both do? They send a ballot to everybody at their home to be mailed back in. They're mail-in balloting states. You can go vote in person, but you get a ballot in the mail. We don't get a ballot in the mail unless you request it. A little different.
What are the asterisks for?
You know, I was trying to think about what that was as I was put them up there, and I'm sure I had a reason. Maybe certain counties do it differently. Montana's there. 16 states have expanded voter access since 2020, while 9 states have voted to restrict it. So you can see the 16 states that have expanded it, they're gray, and the orange states have moved to restrict voter access in the last 4-6 years. How states restrict voting? They purge voter rolls. People show up at the polls, we have no record of you. They end up getting purged. And if you don't have same-day registration, guess what? You're not voting. Some states don't allow voting by mail. Some states don't have drop-off boxes, or they've gotten rid of them. Some states require strict voter ID. Some states change voter locations. Ever gone to your location where you think you're going to vote and find out you got to go someplace different? Not everybody can tell you where that different place is. We can in Minnesota. Not allowing absentee ballot for any acceptable excuse. Some places we can vote absentee if we want. Some states you have to have an approved reason to get an absentee ballot. Not providing enough machines, so there's long lines. Not allowing people water. Did you know that in Georgia, You can't bring somebody a chair to sit in while they're standing in line to vote, and you can't give them a bottle of water. You'll be arrested. You're interfering with the vote. Shame on you. Not allowing others to register, people from out of state. There are some states where you can't have voter registration drives because you can only register up to 10 people, each person individually. Think southern states where they don't want people to register. And then not allowing others to provide transportation to the polling places. Can you believe that?
No.
We do that here with, everybody wants to help out. Not the same everywhere. What states can do? Well, they can have automatic voter registration. How many of you have a driver's license? Okay. How many of us have a grandchild with a driver's license? What did they get to do when they got their driver's license? It was done automatically for them in Minnesota. They were registered to vote. I used to be on the board for something called the League of Women Voters. It's not just for women anymore. And we used to send people to high school graduation practices so that we could encourage people to register to vote. I did this 2 years ago, and everybody came up and said, I just want to come over and say hello. I've already registered. I got registered when I got my driver's license. I mean, young people, and symbol of a vibrant democracy is how much young people want to be involved in democracy, and we're seeing an overwhelming number of young people who are interested in this upcoming election. And the reason we can say that is because the primaries nationwide have been packed. And in Minnesota, the caucuses and the state conventions had like twice or 3 times as many people showing up as they used to than ever before, and almost half of them were first time, and almost half of them were under the age of 35.
Wow.
So there's something happening with voting in this election, at least in this state. Yes, ma'am.
Can a 16-year-old vote?
No, but they can register.
They register but can't vote till
They're 18.
But
Yeah.
when did that start? That's 16.
I believe it started 4 years ago.
Oh, it's recent.
Yeah, it's recent.
You said nothing about citizenship.
Well, you can't vote if you aren't a citizen. And that's true. So when you go to register to vote here, they ask you your name, they show you your information, your address, where you live, and then you sign a statement. Did you bother to read the statement? The statement says, I verify I am who I am and that I am a citizen of the United States. You are swearing an oath. Now, if you aren't, it can be checked. You can go to jail. You can face a $100,000 fine. Do you want that? Voting irregularities are very minor, at least in this state. Can't talk about other states. But I don't believe we're alone in that. Yes, ma'am.
At the naturalization ceremonies here in Minnesota, every naturalized citizen gets the paperwork so they can sign up to vote.
Okay, that's good. Did everybody hear that?
No, what is it?
She said at naturalization ceremonies here in the United States, in Minnesota, which is part of the United States, all those of you who want to be in Canada, shame on you. But they said you get the papers you need to go and register to vote. Okay. There are other things. Early voting. I think Election Day holiday would be nice.
That would be
It would just be great. In order to vote in Minnesota, there's pre-registration now for 16 and 17-year-olds. There's automatic voter registration for driver's licenses. And you can vote from home before every election. Requirements to vote in Minnesota are you have to be a U.S. citizen, you have to be 18, none of you try to be 17, on election day. You have to be a resident of Minnesota for 20 days. You cannot currently be in jail, so don't try and vote for a felony. However, if you're on bail in Minnesota, you do get to vote. Can't have a court order that revoked your right to vote. You have to have a current address and be able to prove that. You can update your address online at the Secretary of State's website or register at the polls when you vote on election day. But you have to show proof that with your name and that you have a current address.
What consists of proof?
Your heating bill with your name on it from Dakota County Electric or whoever.
You have to have 2 forms?
You only have to have one, I believe.
Okay, so
If you are a registered voter and she's in the same precinct, you can vouch for her. Valid driver's license. A lot of times that's not accurate. Passport. High school graduation certificate. Or college. Okay, here in Minnesota, there's 3 ways to vote: by mail, in person, or on election day at the polling site. You can vote ahead of time at City Hall. Minnesota leads the nation in voting. Since 1976, Minnesota has led the nation in voting turnout 10 times in the past 13 elections. That says a lot for us. Maine finished first twice, DC did it once, but we were second all 3 times. Minnesota usually averages over 70%. We've been as high as 77%, which is rather significant. Several presidential elections, but you can see here who the competitions are. The states that have the processes we follow boast higher than average voter turnout. We make it easy for people to vote, and we encourage them to vote, and we provide many different options, and it all goes back to this gal. Anybody remember Joan Grow? Yeah. She revolutionized voting, not just in Minnesota, nationwide, because so many secretaries of state followed her example. She was our Secretary of State for 25 years. And during that time, she implemented many things that take place today, including same-day registration. Joan Grow is still alive, and she put out a book 2 years ago all about her years as Secretary of State. It's a good book. You can register on the day of the election if you have one of these things: a photo ID, proof of your home address, a registered voter who can confirm your address, a photo ID with student housing on it, valid registration at the same precinct, notice of late registration, or a staff person of a residential facility who can vouch for you. So, I got married in 1974, and we discovered that my wife was allergic to Missouri. it put her into misery. She was from here. I was putting her through college, which endeared me to my father-in-law. And she had to do her student teaching, and I got a job here in the fall of 1976 teaching in Roseville. And I am teaching political science and economics. And my wife has got the car because she's doing her student teaching, so I'm getting back and forth on my bicycle to go grocery shopping or a movie or even go to work. And it's election day, 1976. And I come into second hour, my free period, and Mary Anderson says, "Frank, you look so depressed. What's the matter?" And I said, "It's election day. I'm teaching political science, and I can't even vote. I failed to get registered ahead of time." Remember Missouri? You had to be registered how many days ahead? 28? There's no way I can vote, right? It's 1976. Joan Grow put the law forward in the 1974 legislature for the first time to have same-day registration. This is the first election in the nation where you have same-day registration. Mary says to me, "You should go across the street to Kellogg High School after work today. You can register. We have something called same-day registration." So I walk across the street after work that day, and I go up to the table. Now, there are no computers in 1976. Everything is paper. And I go up to the table, and there was a very nice younger woman by our age today. And I said, "I understand I can register to vote." And she says, "Yes, you can. We have that new ballot. Can you show me your photo ID?" And I said, "My wife's got the car in Missouri. I've had no way to get a Minnesota driver's license." "Not a problem. Can you show me proof of your home address?" I actually just moved into my apartment out of my sister-in-law's on November 1st. I don't have anything with my address on it. Not a problem. Is there anybody who could confirm that this is your precinct and that you live here? And I looked across the table and I said, "Well, Mrs. Cheetah, if you remember, we did your son's parent conference last night. I'm his teacher for political science." And she said, "Yeah, I guess I can vouch for you." And I got to vote the first time we had same-day registration. So I'm a big believer in that. Believe me. So there's a new trend. I want you to consider this seriously. It's called ranked choice voting. My former student, Dean Phillips, said I was opposed to this right up to the moment I changed my mind. And I understand what he's talking about. Ranked choice voting means you're going to have somebody who ends up with over 50% of the ballots. And if you can't be somebody's first choice, you want to be their second choice. So you might not want to talk smack about the other person because I might not like you as my second choice. And we have ranked choice voting in certain places in Minnesota. The state of Maine has it. The state of Alaska has it for all their elections. We'll get to that in a moment. I was totally opposed to this until I realized I was the advisor for student government, and every year we'd have elections to elect the student government for the next year. And we'd have 7 people on the ballot, and we'd have to knock one off, and we'd be voting all week and having to count the ballots and insisting people come vote. And it was just a huge headache. Plus the fact I had to do awards, it was the same way. And somebody said, "Try ranked choice voting." Holy cow. We were able to do it the same day because you just drop off the lowest vote total and you redistribute those votes until you get a winner. And we had winners the same day. It was really easy. But it also took some of the emotion out of it. So, if you think about it, it gives voters more choices because more people can run. You don't have to be tied to a particular political party. It requires candidates to build broader coalitions. Compromise is no longer a dirty word in ranked choice voting. It encourages positive campaigning and civility because you want to attract people to vote for you if their candidate doesn't get elected. Third-party candidates can no longer create a plurality winner. I got a big kick out of the fact in Minnesota, in the 2nd district, there would be a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate. It was Angie Craig. And then there'd be this thing called the Marijuana Party candidate. And people would be voting for this candidate who wanted to legalize marijuana. Do you know who was funding the Marijuana Party? The Republican Party. Because it took votes away from the Democratic Party candidate. I'm not saying that Democrats didn't do some of the same kinds of things, but when they passed marijuana, as in Minnesota, they got rid of the Marijuana Party. Third-party candidates have created plurality winners in 3 elections in our lifetime: Clinton in '92, Bush in 2000, Trump in 2016. Ranked choice voting promotes more inclusivity and diverse representative elections. It reduces polarizations, and it gives winners a 50%. So, if you think about 1992, and you look at the popular vote and the electoral vote, Perot got almost 20 million votes. Didn't get any electoral votes, but I would believe that Perot took more votes away from George Herbert Walker Bush than he ever took from Bill Clinton. But he got Bill Clinton elected. If you had ranked choice voting, George Herbert Walker Bush wins that election. My opinion. In 2000, Ralph Nader gets close to 3 million votes. He's not taking those votes away from George W. Bush. He's taking those votes away from Al Gore. If you have ranked choice voting, Gore wins Florida, running away. 2016, Gary Johnson had 4 million votes, Jill Stein 1.2, and other candidates 800,000. There were 6 million votes out there that didn't have a second choice. I'm not saying Trump still might not have won, he might have, but Hillary Clinton might have had a very good shot of winning if you had ranked choice voting. So don't take my word for it. You can see that the last election, Jacob Frey won on the 5th ballot. But my favorite was what happened in Alaska. You had Mary Peltola, and she's running against somebody by the name of Sarah Palin, and a guy by the name of Nick Begich. And there's 3 ballots. And all Sarah Palin can do is talk trash about Mary Peltola. She's just the worst thing ever, according to Sarah Palin. And Nick Burkich, and actually Senator Lisa Murkowski said, we got ranked choice voting here. I can't tell you who to vote for as your second choice, but I know my second choice is going to be Mary Peltola. Nick Burkich is running in the race, and he is endorsing Mary Peltola as a second ballot. And you can see Sarah Palin led in the first round, but after ranked choice voting, she lost the election. So there's two things that happened today or yesterday that have to do with voting. One is called Watson versus the Republican National Committee. This decision protects the fundamental principle that people should not lose their right to vote because the mail delays outside their control. In other words, if you vote by mail and you do it by election day and your vote gets there in a timely manner, in this case, it's the state of Mississippi, you have 5 days, your vote counts because you did it on election day or before. The Supreme Court just said you can't outlaw mail-in balloting. It should be a state issue anyway, but they got that. I believe they got that right. Trump versus Barbara, birthright citizenship. It was a lot closer than I would have liked it to have been because when it was decided over 120 years ago, 140 years ago, it was a 9-0 decision then. It was 6-3 basically saying naturalized citizens, birthright citizenship exists in the United States and we aren't taking that away. And Roberts in his report or in his statement said, children born of parents unlawful or temporarily present in the United States satisfy both elements of the citizenship clause. Under the Constitution, they are citizens at birth. And at this point in time, I will say, that's all, folks. Do you have some questions? Questions. I do have one other thing that I will announce to all of you. What's next? If you're interested, I will be, Harvey's, you want to do it or you want me to? Okay.
Go for it.
I'm putting forth a class for all of us called Disputed Elections. And we will look at the 6 disputed elections and a few others that have tended that way, starting with 1800, 1824, 1876, great robbery there. 1912, hear all about Teddy Roosevelt. 1968, we may have some personal experiences with that, and 2000, and even more. So I hope a number of you sign up and join us. It starts September 15th.
Okay, questions?
I figured New Jersey'd have a question. Yeah.
I'm a little confused about the date, election day. I'm a little confused how in Minnesota this election day registration works. When you just have to prove that you live down the street and you pay your electric bill, how does that prove that you're a citizen?
Remember, you're going to swear an oath.
Okay.
It's a legal oath. And if you're lying, they can prosecute you. Okay. And they have prosecuted 3 people in the last 10 years.
Okay.
So
they do check on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And plus, in fact, it's a sworn affidavit that is witnessed. So, we're trusting people to be honest, but if they aren't,
They might get
some
caught.
people have been caught.
Okay.
And by the way, even if it's a dozen votes out of 3 million, how's that going to influence the total? However, anybody know how many votes Dayton won by? 520. Think about close elections. Yeah. Dayton won when he was governor. He won by 520. And by the way, they were recounted twice, so they got the same total each time. Yes, ma'am.
So we have very recently moved here, and
We were registered voters in in Crow Wing County,
Yeah?
and suddenly in my mailbox is a postcard that tells me I'm registered here now in Edina. How did that happen?
Yeah, did you get a new driver's license?
No,
Maybe when you signed
I've had a
your,
Minnesota driver's license.
maybe when you signed your forms here, they had to be filed with the state. I frankly don't know, but I would encourage you to get on the Secretary of State's website, and they can probably tell you.
Well, mostly I'm just curious. I mean, I'm happy to be registered to vote here so easily, but I mean, and where is our polling?
Well, you look
place
kind of
here?
shady to me, so But congratulations on that. Yes, ma'am.
I think I'm kind of stupid, but how do you rank vote?
How do you rank choice vote?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have 5 candidates. You put a 1 next to your first choice, a 2 next to your second choice, 3, 4, 5. They count all the ballots the first time through. If nobody receives 50%, the person with the lowest vote total is eliminated. Now, that lowest vote total all had that person listed as their first choice. Now they go to whoever those people were, and they take their second choice, and that becomes their first choice. They redistribute those ballots amongst the 4 remaining candidates to see if anybody has 50%. If they don't, they eliminate the 4th, redistribute those ballots to whoever their top choice was at this point, and they do that until somebody achieves 50%, which usually is no later than the second ballot time through. But it can be longer.
In ranked voting, if there are 5 candidates, but I really don't like, I only like 2 of them, can I vote for only 2?
Yes,
first
you
and
may.
second? And it
And
won't
if
be
they
dis-
both get eliminated, so does your vote.
Okay.
But yes, you don't have to vote for any more than you want. But by voting for just one person, you don't actually send them any more strength by that.
Okay, more questions?
Well, it was great being here with you. I've missed you all. Try to stay warm.
But as Frank says, he'll be back in September, and that'll run
7
right up till the week before election. So
That's
it'll be
right.
very, very current, very current. Be aware of that. And I hope this motivates you to primaries or August 11th.
Yep. Get
Yeah,
out and
and then
vote.
there's something coming up
tomorrow.
in November too, I
Yeah.
think, yeah. A couple things that I highlight. I'm looking forward to the movie Thursday night, Hidden Figures.
Ooh, great film.
Yeah. And then Life in Richmond will be back on stage on Thursday the 9th, and we'll be talking about Minnesota State Parks. A couple has biked them all. See you there.